Tonight we're talking about China. Now, many of you know we 11 of us went to Hong Kong about a month ago now. So tonight it's about sharing, and I don't pretend, or Andy and I don't pretend that we know China. So this is more about sharing, and I assume many of you actually know China more than we do. And so basically, I just want to talk about the trip, all the fun time we had, and maybe next time some of you will tag along. I do want to poll the group, like where do we want to take that kind of trip from here? Is that kind of trip interesting to the group? Do we want to take it further away to India, maybe other parts of the world? Shanghai, Beijing, other parts of Asia, South Korea, Japan, right? Is that interesting or not? So right now we actually, Pete and I are talking about like a mobile worldwide, MoDev worldwide. Every year we'll pick a country, we'll pick a place, we'll go, and we actually had a roundtable discussion after this. I don't have time to cut that, so sorry about. I just heard that I'll be running tonight about 2 hours ago. So. So again, before the cameras start rolling, this start rolling. So you try to. So the light will be on the whole time.
Yep, I can turn it off.
No, this S3 here. All right. Anyway.
Hey Z, did you get all the footage from that one night? Can you talk about that?
I have that.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is one of the interesting things we did at the end of the trip was all of us sit down in a round table, have a very nice dinner, a very expensive nice dinner. And then we had conversation, and we recorded the entire 3 hours dinner. Now, obviously, you don't want to sit here and then listen to us wine and dine and talk about different things. So I'm trying to index the entire 3 hours so that the team, some people here or some people can cut it. But yeah, I haven't found the time. I only went through the first hour. But it was interesting. So that brought us the concept of like a MoDev roundtable. So a group of us can go to another place, interesting location. We can just chat. So, all right, is the official camera ready?
Oh, right.
So before we officially start, any question or thing you want to share, you want to make sure we touch on? Yeah.
MoDev Asia, does it include certain places that you did mention about India?
Right.
Does it encompass the entire Asia?
Well, right. So, well, the term MoDev Asia was made up, right? It wasn't a fully built out concept, right? We didn't put together a business plan. Well, what happened? So I can start. Yeah, start recording anytime you want, Tony.
Gotcha.
So what happened is I'm from Hong Kong originally. So last year, right? So this April, last April, I went home, and I was like, well, I'm here. I may as well do some business. So I tell people I'm from MoDev, I want to interview you. So I start interviewing a whole bunch of people, and then start bump into some people who may be interesting to talk to. So at the end of that trip, at the end of that conversation, and I say, well, maybe I'll bring MoDev over here. How's that? And then I bump into some government people, and they're excited. So that's how this whole thing came about. Now then I come back and talk to Pete, and fortunately we make it happen. Not too many people go, but we have 11 people. So it's actually the right size of a group, right? So right now coming back, I think the roundtable type of group is good. So to answer your question, we didn't thought out say, okay, Asia means from like east of Turkey to west of Japan. No, it's not. So this came about because we had the opportunity to do this, and the first time we're going to Hong Kong, and now the Hong Kong government is very supportive, and they want to bring us to Shanghai next year. So we could go to Shanghai next year, or we could do something else, and we could do things differently. So I leave it. I'll continue to have this conversation with Pete. Globalization is something that's very interesting to a lot of people. India obviously would be a place to have a conversation there. So, all right. So anyway, why don't we just so we yeah, standing in for Pete, Z Wong here, Andy from
At 47.
at 47. So Andy, you say a word and then we'll get started.
Well, yeah. So I'm here to share my experience going to China. It was absolutely amazing as a as a U.S. citizen who had never been to Asia, but view Asia as this vast, expansive market where if I could just sell toothpaste to some portion of that billion people, I'd be a billionaire. So I kind of went with that attitude that I think I quickly learned that I was wholly ignorant, but I did learn a whole lot about Asia, and I'm still very, very excited about Asia. It's rife with opportunity. I will share some of that tonight, and I would highly recommend if you ever get the opportunity to go see Asia. It's amazing. Hong Kong is absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to talk and share more about the technology infrastructure. And it's actually fitting that we're doing this in Tech Corner, which is kind of like an incubator.
Right.
And we were exposed to two government-funded incubators in Hong Kong that would put this looks like a shanty compared to the incubators that Hong Kong was showing us.
So, right, what you're looking at, this is going to be my Hong Kong office. We're looking at the South China Sea. This actually beats my office here, so my team is all jealous. They all want to go to Hong Kong. Anyway, so we'll touch on how that happened. Let's see the video first. I'll drive.
While he's keying it up, in case you don't know, Z obviously has a successful company based here in the U.S. He's just opened up an office in Hong Kong. He's got 3 employees. Z worked very closely with the government of Hong Kong to do that, and I think it's very fascinating to hear his story.
Right, sorry about the sound here. As loud as it will go. All right.
Of course, people in the back can't hear it. Can you hear it? All right, so
Yeah, maybe we'll
we'll
talk.
just talk over it, but when we were in Hong Kong, they had a conference called the ICT, which is the International something.
International ICT is what they call IT, Information and Communication Technology.
This is a conference that had hundreds of thousands of people there. It was very much hardware oriented. It was essentially Western companies come here, like the Walmarts of the world, and meet with suppliers to say, I want 100,000 of these tablets. It was absolutely mind blowing.
So we'll send a link of this out so you can actually hear.
YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Does anyone have an office in this building?
No, I
I thought
don't.
we would have powered speakers on their computer.
Right. Yeah, I mean, well, he's not here, so we're not familiar with this location. So, I mean,
We'll send out the link.
yeah.
But this is on the meetup link, right? Right.
On the meetup? Right.
It's
We
on
send
the
it out.
YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you see what I talked about here basically is the contrast that you go there to buy, and now you also go there to sell. And the reason I set an office there is I want to go there to sell.
To customers or to corporations?
Well, I don't know yet. So I mean, right, I call this the 10-year process. So this is my step 2 of the 10-year plan. And China is a very tough market to break into. And I think Andy can share that too. We spent a day in China talking to China Telecom. And what we basically heard is yeah, you guys just don't have a chance. So we spend like 3-4 hours talking. They share what they want to do, what we ask our questions. At the end of the day, it's tough. So, but it's a market I'm not going to give up on, and you shouldn't too, right? So it takes time. So I just think um, it is better to have a team on the ground and to start. Yeah.
So, when you mean by tough, is it the regulation that makes it tough, or is it just
Personalities, culture, what?
Well, let's take a step back real quick.
Right.
Just to set the context, is that Hong Kong is for those of you that already know this, I apologize, but probably some of you are like me. Hong Kong is a special administrative province of China. Think of Hong Kong as like a state of China that gets to govern itself. So Hong Kong has different laws and rules. It's actually capitalist. And then there's mainland China. So we spend 99% of our time in Hong Kong, but then, as he said, we did go to mainland China and learn how to, the difference of the two markets. There was a question about whether you want to sell to consumers or enterprises. Obviously, my business, or At47, is an enterprise-focused business, and I would say that you have to look at Asia in two different lights. There's Greater Asia, which is like Hong Kong, Indonesia, the Philippines, India, whatever it is. That whole Pacific Rim is obviously huge opportunity. And then there's mainland China, which is completely different. From an enterprise standpoint, there's definitely opportunities for my company in Indonesia, Philippines, in Hong Kong. In mainland China, there's probably zero opportunity for At47 at this point. Consumer-oriented development or mobile, certainly, again, it's the same equation. There's opportunities all up and down in Asia. We can get into more details if you're obviously most people here are like Steve, app developers have successful apps. Getting those apps into China is a completely different ballgame than it is here in the U.S. For instance, there is no Google Play on Chinese Android devices. In China, app distribution is done via the telecoms. They have their own app stores. If you have an iOS device in China, you do have Google's, or not Google, but Apple's iTunes. But iOS is such a marginal player in China, it's ridiculous. It's a flat line, and you have Android that's an exponential line. So, and one more thing I'll mention, and I'll let Z. From an At47 standpoint, because we sell the enterprise, we've noticed that in the last year, the enterprise has really started to take off with respect to like understanding mobility and starting to buy enterprise solutions. I did not get that sense in Asia. So consumer-oriented wise, Asia's far ahead of us in terms of their adoption of like mobility. I mean, I remember reading about years and years ago in like Korea, kids could buy stuff from vending machines on their like feature phones, right? So mobility from a consumer standpoint in China, or not in China, excuse me, in Asia is it's very much ingrained. It's far ahead of where I believe we are in the U.S. And I'll show a video. I can actually show two. But from an enterprise standpoint, I got the crickets chirping when I talked about what we do. And it was very similar to the same crickets chirping I heard here 2 years ago when we started talking about what we do. So I think it's a very interesting standpoint from that.
Right. So I'll try to answer. Yeah. Go ahead.
In regards to specifically China and Hong Kong, what is the developer population like, and what is that you learned about, and what is their level of, let's say, expertise and professionalism?
Right. So I'll answer the why do I think China is tough. Or basically, you cannot assume anything. So you cannot assume. I learned to not assume anything at all. So I grew up in Hong Kong. Supposedly I'm a Chinese. I spent 20 years here. And I went back. So again, Hong Kong is very different than China. Hong Kong, you can operate as an American and you can function. You go to Philippines, you operate as an American, you can function. Going to China, you operate as an American, you do not function. Now, I don't want to exaggerate, but to the point that you get on a taxi, you can't go anywhere. So that's why I keep saying it's a 10-year process. Don't think you can operate as an American corporation and change all the labels to Chinese and it will sell. It's not going to sell. Now, at least that's what I learned, and that's why I want to put a team there not in China yet. I couldn't have the courage to actually set up an office in China just yet. I want to learn a little bit more before I step into, because Hong Kong is a relatively friendly place. I don't want to get into too much trouble. I heard a lot of horror stories while there about spending money and just not getting any.
Well, even tactically, so I mentioned that App47 has no chance in China. That's because in order for App47, for a Chinese company to use our service, the data has to live in China. So we would have to set up a data center okay, so the data has to live in China. But it's not like I can walk into China and throw 2 servers and or 2 racks in some data center. I actually have to have a Chinese company or an entity that is 51 or 50% owned.
51%.
50% owned by
51% owned by Chinese.
Owned by a Chinese national. So in order for App47 to sell to a Chinese company, we would have to partner with a Chinese company, call it App47 China. It would be 51% owned by a Chinese national, and then we would have to run our infrastructure in China. It's not. I mean, right now, if you're a U.S. company and you use our services, it's running in AWS, right? Can't do it in China. So that's why it's a 10-year deal. It's not like you can just walk in and be like, hey, Mr. Chinese citizen, let's form a company real quick, and then we'll start making $1 billion.
Right.
You mentioned your data needs to reside in China. Is it a technical constraint, like with the Great Firewall, or is it a?
It's a stipulation of the Chinese government.
Okay.
Political regulation.
I mean, that's basically why you have
Policy.
the Facebook, the Chinese Facebook, Chinese Twitter, Chinese everything, because they shield it off, right? So I want to answer the question about developer education and community. From what I learned, Chinese has great developers. China has great developers in mainland. So I have friends who set up shops in Beijing, in Shanghai, and there's a lot of developers, a lot of high-end developers. Now, the reason I choose to be in Hong Kong again is because of regulation, because of the law and accounting system, a lot of those, and also because of comfort level of the talent. So we went interview the concept. Well, the talent that we saw is very similar to here. That they want to do something. There is a entrepreneurship concept there. They want to be with a startup to do something. Now, I heard in Beijing there's a lot of that too. What I heard also is that in mainland, a lot of developers like to jump ship. So they work for you for 2 months, jump to another ship, jump to another company. That's what I heard the culture is. Not sure if it's true or not, but I will let you know in a few years, I guess. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I was trying to pay attention to a lot of what was going on at that.
Video.
Did you say it was a conference?
It was
Right.
a conference. Yeah.
Okay, and I saw a lot of entertainment. My focus is on more on entertainment, so that caught my eye. So, so if I'm hearing you right, it doesn't matter what you're developing, that you can develop for Hong Kong or Taiwan, but mainland China, all the reading I've done is, I saw Oblivion up there, and getting that into mainland China, into their theaters is probably next to.
It's a huge
impossible.
undertaking, right? So let's use Steve as an example. He has. Do you mind?
Sure.
Steve's a famous MoDev guy, right? Okay, everyone knows Steve. So you've got a number of apps in the App Store. You have Google ones now, right? Or Android ones. So you could naively think, hey, I've got this great consumer-oriented app. I want to sell it to China, right? There's 1 billion people there, 500,000 or 500 million of them have smartphones or something ridiculous. If I can get like 10% of that, I'm printing money, right? So you're gonna go. So maybe you naively think, well, I just gotta talk to someone who speaks Chinese, and they can they'll make my app Chinese, and I'm good to go. Not even close, right? Because you have the distribution problem when it comes to mobile apps. There is no Google Play in China, so you have to actually partner again with a Chinese company, and then you and that Chinese company then they need to go to 3 telecoms, and then sell it to them. And then there's the mind-boggling experience that in China, they don't have a credit card system, or people have credit cards, but it's not really an accepted way of payment. It's more debit oriented.
Yeah, I don't fully understand. Different.
So when you talk,
Everything is different, basically.
so when you saw a lot of the entertainment stuff. So I really need, if there's anything I could maybe convey tonight, is that there's China and then there's Asia.
Got it.
And the stuff you were looking at there was really targeting like Asia and the West. Like, hey, look at these cool things we're building. Take this to Europe. Take this to the United States. Because I mean, we heard lots of successful Hong Kong companies selling into China and doing really cool things. I'm thinking iPhone or iButterfly, that guy.
Right. He has the shop in China.
Right. Yeah, but he had to set up a company in China and then get in there. So if you are or were like me, sitting here thinking, if I could only just break into the Chinese market, it's just like, it's certainly possible. And then there's a great book I read before I went to China. It's called China Inc. It was actually written a number of years ago, but it talks about like the big U.S. corporations that set up shop there, like Ford and all these other ones, and the experiences they had, and that's why it's no joke when you say it's a 10-year project. So I mean, a small software company, I wouldn't even bother. Like, you could look at Asia, and we talked to a number of entrepreneurs. As you talked about, we had this roundtable, and there were other people there that were based in Hong Kong, and there was a U.S. entrepreneur there who was based with Accenture, I think.
Yeah, Accenture in Hong Kong.
And I asked him point blank, I was like, what do we do? Because I want to break into Asia, but this China thing just seems like a giant, I'm just hitting my head against a wall. And he said, no, view China differently. Come in, look at Indonesia, look at the Philippines, look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a population of 7 million people on an island that's, how big is that island?
I don't know
Tiny.
exactly the time, like a DC.
As big as DC.
Yeah. And the workforce, you have like, how many universities are in? I mean, there's like.
No, they're 15, 10, around that.
I mean, think about DC packed into an island. Everything's high. You've got a really young, vibrant community, very well educated. So I mean, as far as a developer talent pool in just Hong Kong alone, something that was very appealing, and hopefully Z will share more. He shared his office. That's an incubator, by the way. His office is overlooking the water, okay, in an incubator. And these incubators basically sat us down and said, hey, you're a U.S. company. That's great. Why don't you come to Hong Kong? And oh, by the way, we have these grants that if you set up R&D in Hong Kong and you hire Hong Kong natives, we'll reimburse you. How much? Up to $8 million.
No big deal, right? So they're like, yeah.
And these incubators you had access to green rooms. It's like, I want to make a commercial about my company. I mean, when's the last time one of us thought about making a commercial, right, that we'd air on NBC? They do that all the time there, and they have green rooms. It's like, yeah, go ahead in there and do your commercial. We got this media team to help you. At one point, do you guys know Navroop with Griffin? We're standing in the green room looking at like this project that these guys are making a commercial for this like startup, and he looks at me and goes, "My government has failed me," because this was an incubator. All right, I mean, this is. Anyway, the amount of money that these government, and I say these because I just got back from another event, and we're talking about Canada, but in general, Hong Kong, the amount of money that they are pumping in to IT is astounding. The innovation coming out there, there's no wonder why, from a consumer standpoint, from Asia, in my opinion, is far ahead of the U.S. as far as acceptance. Some of the apps we saw, hopefully I keep pointing that I will, but I will demo something that I saw that just blew me away, that if I saw here in the U.S., people would fall over, in my opinion, in terms of, wow, that is cool. So.
Right, what's that?
You mentioned continuously Asia. Are you talking about India, or is India a separate market? And it's not talking about that.
That's a fair question. You know what? I'm going to separate India from that.
I'm going to separate too.
I think
So,
it's a different market.
right, just want to go back to, like, if you want to, I'm viewing Hong Kong and Taiwan as a stepping stone, right? At least you get the language. You go there, you get the language, you get the team there. So I view China as a big war that I need to tackle. And if I have a base in Hong Kong, I can go in and fail, come back, go in and fail and come back many times. But from here, it's a far longer deployment, right? So,
But what's interesting about that statement, by the way, is that's why Hong Kong exists for China. It's just so China can experiment with the West and fail and not get pie in its face, right? So that's the beauty of Hong Kong. It's this Chinese thing that's set up that's so free and and very westernized. And people, one thing I wondered is like, well, how long is that going to last? At what point is do the communists come over and say, screw this? And actually, some Hong Kong people were like, no, you've got it all wrong. This is a perfect thing for China to test. Hey, here's a capitalist thing, and they can fail, and it doesn't reflect poorly on China as as a government.
They're actually also testing democracy in Hong Kong, right? So they cannot control Taiwan, right? Taiwan is literally a separate country, but they completely control Hong Kong. If they want to screw it, they screwed it 10 years ago. So they're actually testing democracy. They're giving Hong Kong a little bit more democracy, trying to see how it works. China, in itself, is capitalized already, right? From a economy perspective, the political system is very different, and they don't want to relieve control. But in Hong Kong, they can try. So I can agree to this. Like they're using Hong Kong this way, right? If you know of Macau, that's another island outside of China. That's the same thing. They're using Macau as Las Vegas, right? So state law says in China there's no gambling. Gambling is illegal. But there's Macau, a Chinese state, that is entire reason of existence is for gambling. So they're, like you can see the Chinese government doing these kind of stuff that they want to experiment something that they quote unquote don't approve, but they can do this with these kind of self-governing states.
So Hong Kong is both, it's a bi-directional experiment, right? For Western companies, you set up shop in Hong Kong and you work on breaking into China, but you have this safety net. And it's exactly the same for the Chinese companies setting up shop in Hong Kong and saying, hey, how can we break into the U.S. market?
I got saved up now. I got two. Please don't take my picture.
Oh, sorry.
I'm in a post office somewhere. There might be some kind of facial recognition. So you said Android, you have to sell the apps through telecom, but I thought Android apps anybody can distribute those.
Well, anyone can, but how do you get it to the end person? I mean, you could email around the APK, but if you want mass
don't they have a download? Can't they purchase it off your own server or something?
Well, okay, so technically, yes, I could set up a server, but the problem is in China is that at least, and I will try to explain. If there's anyone here that actually knows more about this, please speak up. But the average citizen does not have a credit card. It's very much bank
so you
drafted.
Bill it through the telecom as well.
Exactly. So the telecom bills them essentially immediately. I guess the telecom has access to their account. So when they say, I want this app, 99 cents is withdrawn immediately. There is no form of credit. And it's not because they don't have that system. It's that the culture does not necessarily trust credit transactions. They very much want it to be real.
Well, it's a matter of government control, too. You think the IRS is bad here, for heaven's sake.
That's a good point, yeah.
And you might as well just come out and say it.
So the distribution channels in China are very much controlled by the telecoms, which was actually what we had here before Apple, opened up things with iTunes. If you remember, in fact, there's a gentleman here that worked for Nextel, right? In the feature phone days, the telecoms had their app stores, but they didn't do very well, right? And so Apple came out with the iPhone and iTunes, and boom, now telecoms have zero control. Which, by the way, telecoms are trying to get back now with Firefox OS. But so it's very interesting to look at China and say, look, the telecoms control it.
So you have your Chinese partner that's taking 51% from you.
Yes.
And then you have, Apple or the telecom that's taking another 10, 20, 30% from you.
Yes.
You have 20%. It's got to cost you at least that much to develop your app.
Yes.
Why bother?
It's a great statement. I don't have a good answer for you. That's what I walked away with, too.
And part two of that is, South Africa does the same thing with the 50% ownership. I'm sure there's some other countries, too. But you greatly run the risk of them saying, you know what? This is my company. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
China
It's
did
nice
that
meeting
once
you.
before. They kicked out everybody from the West.
So yeah, I can tell you another story. My dad runs a retail store in China that's how I got my education. So they had it for 10 years. And after 10 years, they knew going in that their lifespan is only 10 years, because after 10 years, they learn everything from you, and they say, nice doing business with you. Now go back. And that's not, that's the norm. It's so factories that used to be in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong moved to China, and they all know that. Okay, after a while, after you've been successful, they take it away. So they all operate business as such, knowing that. So now, so that's what exactly just what I want to share. 10 years later, they closed shop, they got money out, and retired. Um, now, to answer your question about why bother, well, I'll answer that question maybe a few years later. I will come back and say, yeah, don't bother.
Well, and that's one specific example, and that's an app market, and I think the app market is broken there, and that's why if I had the greatest idea, for an app that I think would do well in China, I'd probably try to go to Indonesia or something first, if I felt like from an Asia standpoint.
Right, here is why I want to bother. I think in the future, in 10 years from now, there's only two ways of doing things in the world. You either do things in US way or Chinese way. And everybody in between either falls this camp or that camp because of sheer market power, right? So I look at the world as such, so I want to have both.
He's hedging his bets.
Why would it be just only China or the US?
Well, because
India also has got
right.
like,
Not right. Well, yeah. So that's my naive view of the world, right? So I mean, you right now China is such that they are closed. They don't want to talk to you. India wants to talk, so it's almost like, so let me put it the other way. If there's a Chinese way and everybody else's way, because everybody else wants to collaborate. China does not want to collaborate. China says, this is my way. You either come here or not come here. So they right now will for the longest time, will have another way of their own way of doing things. India and other countries tend to collaborate, tend to like, okay, well, let's work together. So right now, that's how we can sell into places like Africa. We have customers in India everywhere except for China because they don't like to do things our way. And so that's how I view things, right? I'm not trying to diminish India's influence.
But the Chinese are at least direct and honest about it, that this is what we're doing, whereas other countries that say they want to collaborate, really it's only one-way collaboration, where we're going to learn everything that you do, and then we're just not going to work with you, we're going to go off and do it ourselves.
You could say that about a lot of countries.
Well, I am saying it about a lot of countries, but I'm saying at least China tells you right up front, we want 51% and you got a short lifespan here.
Well, not just that. I mean, that is just one aspect of it, right? So we travel halfway around the world and see them and talk to them for, 3 hours. And they basically...
being China Telecom.
Right, China Telecom.
Which is the AT&T or Verizon of China.
Right, the biggest one, right? So they basically say, yeah, there's no chance.
Yeah.
And they say it nicely, but that's the message.
So, kind of going back to Andrew's point about, so just throwing up an idea for like Google going to China, right? I know they had some problems. What if there was a solution and Google kind of makes it into the Chinese market? Would it still be,
So there actually is promise of that. They did disclose that Google Play will be distributed on future devices in China. They said by this summer, so 2014 maybe, there will be a direct, path.
Okay.
Now, whether or not your app can translate, not like physically translate into Chinese, but just a Chinese citizen finds your app interesting is a completely different ballgame. But keep in mind, that's all new devices sold in China, so it's going to take a long time for Google Play to be a viable channel in China. I think maybe like 2016 or something. But the charts that China Telecom showed us were, literally it was a hockey puck in terms of device distribution. You had, Android devices going like this, and then you had literally, I've never seen this before, iOS devices going down. Like literally, there's like no market for iOS in China. It's sad.
So let's take that, and I want to go to the truth. Yeah, go ahead.
Circling back to what we were talking about before,
with entering into China. I've heard that if you go invest a certain amount of money into China, you don't need to have a Chinese partner, only 51%. I was curious if you knew what that number.
We don't know, and that number probably too high for me.
I've also heard that profits made in China have to stay in China.
That is changing. That I know is changing, and that's also another vehicle that they want to use Hong Kong for. It's to allow you to route money out.
We could use all those Walmart profits. Why don't we do that here?
Right.
It's suffice to say it's pretty complicated, you know, and I you know, my message, another message I hope I leave you with is if you're a small company or even a medium-sized company and you were like, yeah, I'm thinking about China, I would think twice.
No, don't think about China. Think about
look at Z's company as an example of, you know, getting a foothold into Hong Kong.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, if you want to talk, call me and we'll get enough coffee. But I want to bring that. So Eddie, start talking about this.
Oh yeah,
this
is an incubator. This looks like, you know, like George Mason University or something like that, right? I mean, this is an incubator where they give you space.
That whole complex?
Yeah, and that's just some of it. That's not the whole complex.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's like an auditorium they built. Who was the guy? He invented fiber optics or something. It was the father of fiber optics. Like this is well, you know, this is all office space. And they have like cafeterias and atriums. I mean, it is.
So I mean, go back here. This is just one section. So they're building the third.
That big bubble thing you saw is between these buildings over here. We were in this building. This is the water over here. That's the South China Sea. I mean, yeah. Imagine this being part of George Mason. That's an incubator for them. Like instead of it being like a little. Oh yeah, so if you are into like, again, these are the services you have as a part of the incubator. If you're building like some sort of wireless technology, they have all the testing, so you can get it certified. That's a wireless testing room. You can see it's lead. You can see inside, so they're doing all sorts of testing on signal processing, and they have experts there. They have like scientists that's like at your disposal.
Holy cow.
So that's us. So then we went to Shenzhen.
In Shenzhen, this is the the gadget capital of the world. This is where they build. There's like alleys where you can go down. They have factories building, tablets.
Well, your tablets, iPhones, yeah, everything.
And this is something interesting. How many of you have like a Google, or no, excuse me, an Android tablet? Like what do you guys have? Like Nexus? Or
Nexus 7.
Nexus 7. How much did you pay for those?
$200.
So that conference that we were at, so there are probably, I mean, I'm just going to guess, there's probably 2,000 vendors at this conference that make tablets. 7-inch, 9-inch, 12-inch, any size you want, actually, any spec you want. And so Barg Upender, he comes here a lot, he runs MoDev, he and I had this great idea. Well, let's look at, we had an idea, business ideas. We started talking to vendors about tablet specs. I could get a 1024 by 700, not 700, but 660. What is it?
768.
768. The resolution. That's a pretty nice, 7-inch tablet, running basically Android. The latest Android with like maybe what's standard memory in these guys? Like maybe 4 gigs or something. Space, $65. $65. And that was custom spec'd for me. I'd have to buy, they quoted me I had to buy 1,000 units, but you can knock them down to 500, whatever it is. So, I mean, that is literally, I mean, it's a race to the bottom, right? And so, we talk about these awesome, the iPad. I saw iPads, like basically knockoffs of iPads that you could get for like $100. I mean, it was ridiculous. So that's Shenzhen. It's absolutely amazing from a hardware standpoint. The stuff they're pumping out.
Right. They have a knockoff Apple store that I saw when I was in China. I mean, the whole store was...
Well, they're real stores now. So we actually had MoDev there. We didn't just go there to have fun.
We did Disrupt-a-thon.
Right. So,
and it was astounding, the stuff they were showing us. I mean, like literally disruptive. I mean, we disruptive on a whole nother level, the kind of stuff they were showing us. And
that's you.
Of course, yeah, I knocked it out of the park, right, guys? That was my that was the crickets because I'm talking about enterprise mobility and managing apps, and it was like I could hear the hay bale kind of whatever the tumbleweed going by. Okay,
So-
this is something you want to talk about. That?
Yeah.
This is something fascinating. So, and if you there's another mirror, touch screen, clear screen LEDs. So imagine this window over here being an LED display that actually you can touch and interact with, just like your device. So this guy's a brilliant, he runs a company, I forget the name of the company. Cherry Picks. They made an app called iButterfly. It is more popular in some countries than Angry Birds. And it's a virtual reality app where they partnered with, imagine this like you walk to Target or something, and you hold up your iButterfly app, and it's a virtual reality app, so it's your camera, and you're viewing like the audience or wherever it is, in Target, and butterflies fly by, and you catch them with your camera, like you catch the butterfly, and you can trade them with buddies, and the butterfly is a coupon that you can then present, hey, check this butterfly, and they're unique, and it's become a cultural phenomenon because it's like, hey Z, what butterflies do you have? And people trade them, and there's a value to them because it's like, oh, I've got a butterfly that gives me 20% off whatever jeans at Walmart. So those guys built that up, but now they're building apps that are in clear screens. So Z, can you see the second window? So imagine, before you watch this video, imagine walking into like a Sheetz or a 7-Eleven, the big refrigerators in the back? They have those lame stickers. It's like, Red Bull, 25% off. No interaction. Now imagine walking into a 7-Eleven and this is what you see. That's a refrigerator. Do you guys see that? It's a refrigerator with a clear LED screen showing apps.
How fun.
In English.
So that's literally, it's a glass panel showing a video, and then Z, go back to the picture of what's his name. Okay, so imagine that, and then they've added touch sensitivity. So you could go in and say, oh, I don't want to see the ad on Red Bull. I want to see what's the coupon, with beer. And then they've through RFD and sound, I think they've integrated Sonic with your phone, so that you can literally, I could walk up with my phone and I could get, I could scroll through and I could watch the display for Guinness or whatever, and I'd get my little Guinness coupon, like whatever, on my phone. Then I'd walk up and get my 20% off. Absolutely fascinating, and for them, it's like, well, no big deal.
Right.
So
I fell out of my seat when I saw this.
So it's like holographic. It's like Minority Report. It's like
Which one?
augmented reality. Is that what you meant?
Well, the iButterfly one is augmented reality. This is running in a clear LED, and also they showed flexible. It's wild the kind of stuff they're showing, and so like literally you could come up here and start swiping this and interact with this app, but it's running on a clear thing, so it's a refrigerator or whatever it is.
So
Where did one operating system?
It's all Android.
Where did the butterflies come from? Do they come from the store itself? Or?
yeah, so he did it through. So I think the different business model that they're doing than what we would have done is that they do this in a campaign model, where they're not selling it as a consumer app, as like Angry Birds, or not even a game. It could be a popular game, but they do this in an advertising campaign. So they sell these to brands. If you want to do like like Sony, right? They're showing Sony, right? Yeah. So this is the video.
And this is what's also astounding, is that it came out in 2010. They've been doing this for like a number of years.
Yeah. So I think you tweeted.
Yeah. I fell out of my seat when I saw this because it just, the interaction that consumers take for granted there is so, I think, foreign to at least me as a stupid American.
I just posted this to our Twitter feed.
Whoa.
This is Japanese.
Yep.
Yeah, it's throughout Asia.
Yeah, he has it in I think 11 countries now.
Wow.
And everywhere it goes is not just launching it. They launch it with the brand. So I think in Thailand was Sony who got it, and it was when Sony was releasing some product, they say, okay, Butterfly will be in whatever mall, you guys go catch it, and everybody goes and catch a butterfly.
Holy cow.
And something interesting that he told that, again, for us U.S. consumers or U.S. entrepreneurs is, he's based in Hong Kong, his company. He's got locations in China. I think he said he had about 60 or 70 developers. I mean, he's got a fairly
Yeah, right. His company is about 100 people.
So they developed an app. It might have been an early version of iButterfly, and to open the app, you had to slide. And he got a cease and desist letter from Apple, saying, we're basically going to sue you for patent infringement. And so his message back to us was, I want to come to the U.S. market, but I'm scared because you guys are going to sue me. And we gave the same exact message back to them. We'd love to come to China, but you guys keep pirating our stuff, So it was very interesting, the dichotomy there.
Well, yeah, I can talk about it in another meetup. Yeah, go ahead.
So it kind of seems like they're doing a lot of stuff which is not, we don't know. Like for example, Google, they had the recent I/O, right? They don't have anything of that sort.
No.
So is it right to say that it's sort of a closed market?
No, it's not. It's just, that's why we go there. I mean, so another thing I learned and I want to share is ultrasound. So they're very, very mature from a development perspective. It's not mature from a usage yet. So a lot of their developers already integrate ultrasound into their apps so that two machines can communicate, can share information. Now we talk about that. I think it was invented here, but they already have people using ultrasound as like in restaurant. You go to wait for, like you get a number in the restaurant, right? What they have an application for is, well, put your phone here with the iPad, and the ultrasound give you a number, and now you can walk away. They have ultrasound, and that was based in Taiwan, ultrasound payment system that can bypass the NFC, right? So they have NFC too. NFC is everywhere. So they're now talking about ultrasound, trying to walk around the NFC and do it differently. And so it's just like, I think people do it here, but I just is not as popular. So I talked to a lot of developers. They're like, yeah, ultrasound sonic is no big deal. They all know how to do it. It's just another protocol. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it is, because every machine can send sound and everybody can listen to sound. So once you know the basics, I mean, turning sound into number is not a big deal. We just don't do it here.
There's another an interesting app that they showed at the Disruptathon. When I interact with an iPad, it's very much like me interacting with the iPad, like whatever games, or I watch my kids. This company demoed an app where the iPad, you'd sit it down on a stand, and it was shooting arrows at you, and you had to jump out of the way. And so it was like one of these physical games. And through the camera, it was watching you and figuring out if you dodged the arrow or not. So it was like a reversal. And the way they looked at interaction was completely, opposite the way, it's always like human towards the iPad, but then it was like the iPad's playing with you and you're jumping out of the way. And it was fascinating just the way that, again, because I think from a consumer standpoint, the mindset there is so far ahead of ours that they're coming out with this innovation that it never even occurred to me.
Because of the little girls that were in that's with the butterflies. There are so many rules and regulations here in the U.S.
Privacy.
Yeah,
COPPA.
with the privacy, and is that not? I mean, because I've known, because all of my animators are, Japan is everything, so they would always come back and go, you just have no idea how far behind the U.S. is, because their kids all have iPhones or whatever. So when you went over there, what, as far as us marketing over there, is there that same kind of privacy wall that we would have to deal with?
I don't see that.
Yeah, I would say that it's completely different. Just like IP law is different, when you go overseas, and obviously accounting. I think privacy, I think we all know the privacy concerns here in the U.S. In fact, it's only going to get more problematic here in July 12th, right?
Right.
We didn't get the message. I know that, like, for example, China's looking at it, but then that's a different market.
Right.
You have to look at the individual markets, but I don't sense that they have as Byzantine or draconian laws yet. But they may follow suit if if the U.S. continues.
So I get the impression that, comparing our society versus theirs, that we're very protectionist and they're very let live or it survives or it doesn't. And so you're going to have a lot of rapid iterations of ideas and projects, and they're not really going to be well protected. And you have to go in, I guess, with the mentality that if I'm going to take on this market, I have to accept that.
Right.
there's
So
good
I
chance.
will take that. So that I will lump it in East Asia, Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
right? So Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, Singapore, Philippines, they're all very similar. Very high pace, very consumer oriented, and iterate really, really quickly. And Hong Kong and Japan in particular is very trend driven. Something in trend, the whole community go one direction. And then the next week is not in trend anymore, nobody touches, right? So you got to be there to do that. So like a friend of mine just got into a concept of another startup doing reality games. So they are trying to take the RPG games and build shops that is like literally the adventure game. You go in and you solve puzzles. So those kind of thing, it only worked there because once it hit and you have millions of people going there, and then maybe a year later nobody touches it. But that's the kind of pace that it's going through. Now China is totally different. So I will lump that in the Southeast Asian market is like that. And I can talk a little bit about privacy and security concern that from what I've seen that they don't know or they don't care or both. Like they love Android. One of the main reasons is you cannot pirate games you cannot easily pirate games or apps on the iOS. So I'm recording, but that's okay. My parents keep saying, "Well, how do I jailbreak this thing?" I say, "Your son's job is to build software, to build iOS software." Right? But yeah, that's that. They all do that, so that's why. I mean, they like the Android platform because you can load whatever you want into it. Now, we look at it. I mean, I went there and I used my Android machine, and on the Android machine, built-in does not have a Chinese keyboard, right? So I wanted to start typing Chinese with my friends in Hong Kong, and I went download a Chinese keyboard, right? There's a million of those on the Android Play. Now, the first thing they want you is, well, the developer of this keyboard could log your keystrokes. Do you accept or not? Well, I say no. I say, well, screw you, I'm going to type English. But they all accept it. I mean, they all get used to it. No problem. Nobody screw us, right? So they all look past that.
But interesting
So-
also, we brought up the pirating issue, and in the U.S. or maybe it's a Western thing, whatever. But we look at it as wrong. Like you built that, I need to pay for it if you ask for money. And I seem to remember them saying, from a cultural standpoint in China, it's not that they see it as they're doing something wrong. It's that it's just culturally accepted to be able to do that. They don't see it as, I'm wronging you, I'm defrauding you out of your, what's rightfully yours. So it was kind of a different, mindset in terms of, we look at it as, oh, this, gosh darn it, they keep pirating my software, screw them, they're screwing me. But they're not doing it to purposely screw the person that made it. It's just kind of culturally, I want that, so I'm going to take it.
That's yeah.
And culturally, if you look at where China has come from the time of the Cultural Revolution, I had friends that went to China in 1980 to study Chinese, and they were followed everywhere they went. And if they talked to a Chinese citizen, that day, when they separated ways, that Chinese citizen would be taken in for questioning. So they've come from a society, from a culture that every move they made, every breath they took, just like, you could look at the Soviet Union before that broke up and the KGB. And then there's a whole nother way to look at it, which I didn't know, but I was speaking to a Norwegian guy, and he tells me that you could look up that everybody's salary and where they work in the country, you could look it up, and it's out there for everybody. And you know, me being an American, oh well, now I know I'm going to be targeted for somebody to sue me. Women are going to come after me because I'm making so much money. I wish, but and you know, we come from that paranoid view, and he had a totally different viewpoint. He says, well, you know, we're not like that here in Norway. We're not so paranoid. We look at it a different way. We look at it that, you know, because they're more of a socialist country and your taxes are so high, but everything is free, like education and healthcare. They say we want everybody to know, and we want other people to see what each individual is contributing to our society.
Fair.
So they have a whole, you know, now as an American, I don't buy that for a second, but that's their culture, and that's the way they look at it. So, you know, privacy is really something that Americans have come to be fooled to thinking that we actually have. But it's something that we expect, even though we have less and less of it. I mean, I saw a drone flying circling overhead before I came to the building, too.
Oh, sweet. They were probably tracking Z because you.
I now have ties to the Chinese government, right? So, right.
It was funny because we went with China Telecom. There were four people we met with, and these people were like, well, ostensibly, some of them were running some of the divisions in China Telecom. And each, or three of them gave us a presentation, which was really cool in Chinese. I taped it because it was wild, and then they had a translator translate. But there was one guy who never spoke, but he just kept taking notes. And so a few of us afterwards were like, that was the government official making sure that, you know, those guys didn't screw up, right? You know, the tailing. I mean, I'm sure he was just, you know, happy to be there, whatever. But again, the cultural thing, like, oh yeah, you know, they're following us. You know, we tried to get on. All of us were looking at Facebook. You know, when we were on the Wi-Fi. Can we get to Facebook? You know, can we tweet this? You know, like,
Maybe they're not trusting. Maybe they're not trusting of the, you know, the electronic payment system because they know that every Android app developer is logging all their keystrokes.
yeah.
Right. So now this is the roundtable dinner that we had, and we had a fun time.
Thankfully, you don't have me sleeping. I was
Yeah,
afraid
we
about
had that.
So, you know, keep in mind, Hong Kong and China is 12 hours ahead. And during that dinner, it caught up with me, and I fell asleep in the middle of the dinner. There we go.
All right, so that's all the picture I have. So I want to steer the conversation about another topic that was talked extensively in the dinner, and that's hardware. So we touched on that about the cheap hardware, and I realized I walked the hall. I walked two expos, and I walked the hall, and I realized, right? I do iPhone builder, right? So I realized, well, yeah, I can do iPhone headphones, iPhone case, iPhone tablet. I can brand from top to bottom because it's so cheap. I mean, the headphone that looks good is like 50 cents. I mean, the cases that look good is $6. So I could do that,
The
and
Google
then we.
glasses next year, they'll be there. They'll probably be like $6. You know, minimum order 500.
I just paid $1,500 for these.
Right.
Okay, so maybe next year it'll be 150, but it will be a race to the bottom once they start making it, mass produce it in China.
Go ahead.
No.
No. So I just want to touch on that. So
Yeah.
do you want to share a little bit on the hardware
It was
side?
completely fascinating because again, I think, well, I speak for myself. I'm a software guy. Z is too.
Yeah.
I can build things.
Well, most of us are software guys, so we look at hardware as these things that makes no margin, hard to do in
Well,
your warehouse, right?
And also expensive, right?
Right.
Like, you know, Google Glasses, for example. I would never want to, at least before I went to China, you know, why would I ever want to produce or make Google Glasses? It's so daggone expensive, right? I mean, I'll make the software for it and let some other fool make the hardware. But then you go to China and you go to one of these expos or you go to Shenzhen, and you realize that there are 100 factories all trying to make Google Glasses, and they're all racing to the bottom because they want to get you the sale. So all of a sudden, hardware starts to become very interesting. It's like, well, I could come up with a solution where I could buy perhaps. I'm thinking out loud. I could buy 1,000 Google Glasses and put my own OS on it or some special app, and then I could market that to the U.S. and I can charge them 100,000 times more because U.S. citizen or U.S. market will pay for it, right? You paid $1,500. But I guarantee you Google did not pay, or whoever you bought it from, but whoever made it, I guarantee it did not cost them anywhere close to $100 to make that.
Sure.
Right? Just like, he's got an Air, I've got an Air. I'll pay the premium, but you know that Apple probably gets that produced at it's probably under $100. Ridiculous. It is so cheap to get hardware made in China. So I know for a lot of us, we spent at the time at the round table kind of like, this is fascinating because now we have these relationships in China. We came here, we saw. And we were a few of us were batting around ideas about kind of maybe coming up with our own brand of tablets and throwing special software on it and trying to sell it in the U.S. We've since stepped away because it is somewhat of a scary proposition because it is a race to the bottom. We looked on Amazon. You can actually buy really nice tablets for $80 on Amazon right now. They're not Kindles, but they're from a manufacturer in Shenzhen. But it was eye-opening to discover that hardware doesn't have to be. Beautiful hardware does not need to be $3 grand. Right? I saw amazingly beautiful Android tablets, white, curvy, with the rounded edges, look like little mini iPads. $65. All of a sudden there's like, wow, I could maybe if I had a great idea, I could source it there. In fact, we had a gentleman with us that was actually sourcing something. He's a local here. I won't steal his thunder, but if you talk to Todd, ask what he's up to with white noise. Being able to go directly to a factory and say, I've got this idea for this thing, can you mass produce it for me at $10 a pop, $65 a pop, $200 a pop, doesn't matter. It becomes very, very interesting. But you got to be in China to see it and get these ideas, get there.
Go ahead, in the back.
So I've been in Hong Kong and I've actually visited the Ministry of, I think it's Trade and Agriculture. Are those folks who we're talking to, they had a lot of the incubation stuff. Type stuff.
Well, we talked to the tech people. So the two groups we talked to, one that's called the Cyberport. It's an IT incubator. The one you saw earlier is called the Science Park. It's all about hardware, actually, telecom and hardware.
So it wasn't the same government people that
It's not the same.
It may not be.
Right, it's not the same department, if you will, but they're doing very similar things. The office I have, right, is amazingly cheap. Now, if you know Hong Kong is expensive, okay. I don't have the picture here, but
it's probably worse. It's actually most real estate. Isn't it the most expensive real estate in the world or something?
Yeah. So we stay in a hotel, a relatively nice hotel. So we walk outside in the neighborhood. It's not an upscale neighborhood, but middle class, like Western Herndon type middle class type neighborhood. And I point to those buildings. It looks ugly. But each one of those are more than $1 million. Each one of those 700 square foot apartment, it's more than $1 million. So we can't afford. Well, I can't afford those, but they're living there. So while their real estate is so expensive, the government still make these office buildings affordable to IT companies. So that it's what Andy was talking about. The government is trying really hard to push IT. Push technology, push hardware. If you want to do that, then they're very supportive.
Did you have a question though?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
What about developer salaries? Taking into account that such high price for real estate.
So it turns out, because I asked this question, and I want to say a fully loaded hourly employee in U.S. dollars in Hong Kong. I'll check my notes. I actually have them with me. I want to say it was like $55 an hour.
Okay. Yeah.
That was like average senior developer. Even though real estate's really expensive there, everything else is very affordable. They have like the world's best transportation system, so no one really needs a car.
Car is super expensive. That's why cars are like super luxury.
Yeah.
How about income tax?
That's low.
Yeah, he would eat. Well,
16%
if you have
flat.
specific questions on salary, obviously he can answer. He's got now employees in Hong Kong. But
So
it was very
right.
appealing to
It's
me.
very. Yeah. So this question comes up to me a lot. It's like, how do they live? So things are expensive. Food is cheap, right? Transportation is reasonable. You don't drive. The salary, so it's in general about half of here, right? So 55 bucks, right? So here's 80, 90 bucks, right? So it's about half. So it's a very different dynamic. So people that are young people in particular not having our kind of buying power. So that also makes me and make us realize how good we have being here. I keep telling us and people around me, like, well, and especially young developers that we're hiring, like, you have a good life here because you work 5, 6 years, chances are you can buy a house, no problem at all. You buy a house, buy a car, have a couple of dogs, right? So your life is no problem. Over there, and it's not just Hong Kong, I think a lot of the Asian country had that problem too, where as a young person you grow up and you may not be able to afford a house. And without a house, without real estate, basically you're stuck in this rental market, and so I mean that's something else. But that's another thing that I observe.
I checked my notes. I stand corrected. It's about $5K a month to employ a young person in Hong Kong. That's about $30 an hour. So
right.
But it is about rough half, right? Because the average software developer is going to run a corporation about 10 grand a month, fully loaded, but healthcare. But by the way, healthcare isn't it? There is no healthcare is free for citizens, right?
There is your universal health care in Hong Kong, and also private health care. So that will be another topic that we can talk about. What we do here, what we try to do. Well, yeah. Granted, Hong Kong is a small society, but they are able to do both. Actually, have the private system running and the public system running concurrently. So if you want to go with the public system, the Obamacare, if you will, there is such, and then there is a private system, healthy, running, no problem. So, I mean, I always like look at it fascinating.
In
Yeah.
terms of the,
Sorry, go ahead.
You were getting back to what you were talking about, hardware. I have a friend that has like the largest radiator shop in Arizona, and he buys containers of, or he was buying containers, like he buys 7, 10 containers of radiators from China every couple months in a shot. And he told me that he would send that 25% would be garbage, and that he would, and then he'd call up the manufacturer and they'd say, okay, we'll give you 25% off your next shipment, but they would never like actually refund anything. So in short order, he's getting a free container, but even that's going to have 25%. So I guess the point I'm making is that there's in China, because it's really extremely tough to have any kind of quality control. And the guy that you just bought 1,000 tablets from today, you go back a month later and say, hey, I need 5,000 now. He's not there anymore.
Well, fair. That is so. With tablets, a variable that we were looking at was battery life, right? And of course, they would all lie to you and say, "Oh yeah, this tablet, could run for 8 hours," and we'd laugh, like, "Yeah, right." But here's the difference, right? Is I agree with you that there might be some quality issues, but he's one of 1,000 factories, so I wouldn't necessarily buy 1,000 at first. I'd buy like 4 or 5 and test them for a few days or months or whatever it is. If I liked them, I'd do an order. But if I didn't like them, or if he sent me a bunch of junk, I have 9,999 other choices to make if I so choose. So there is a perceived quality issue in what maybe Chinese factories are pushing out, but it's not like there's just one factory and you're stuck with it. You have choice, and I think the quality issue will start to, or quality of these things will come up as more and more buyers demand it. I mean, obviously the Walmarts and the Targets of the world have zeroed in on the factories that can actually build something, right? The Samsung devices that you all have, or the Google, the iPhones, they're coming out of China, right? I mean, so they can build stuff of high quality. Just it's incumbent on you to find it.
I mean, what are the barriers for like someone in the U.S. to take advantage of these technology incubators in?
I don't think there's any.
Yeah, there's very little.
Just go there. I mean, they're government entities, so they care about jobs. like ours, right?
Except
So-
that they're willing to put money behind it.
Right. So they're saying if
There's going to
you,
be some conditions, right? Like,
No,
they're just
there's a-
not going to be giving away $8 million.
well, no, I mean,
it's
obviously,
great. It's matched. So it isn't not that they'll just stroke you a check for $8 million and you can go buy your high rise and your Ferrari. You have to actually show them that you spent the money.
Okay.
So like using Z as an example, if he does get this grant, I'll let him talk. But let's say he hires 2 employees and builds out an office and does some other stuff, and he goes back to these government agencies and says, at the end of 2013, I spent whatever $25,000, and then they'll give him a check for $25,000.
Do you do some sort of like a contract agreement or anything is in writing with the government?
Oh yeah, well you have to apply for it and they have to actually agree to it. So there are U.S. companies that actually haven't been able to get this grant because there's lots of interesting clause, like they talked about IBM couldn't qualify because you have to meet certain stipulations of the government. You
It's
have to
like
set up R&D. You have to
60% R&D or some percentage needs to be R&D in technologies that they care about.
And you can see U.S. companies wanting to set up shop in Hong Kong to break into China. They couldn't care less about the R&D. They want a sales force, right? And so that's what Hong Kong and these governments are trying to. No, I don't want all your sales, your slimy sales guys hanging out in Hong Kong. I want you to hire, my citizens to build your stuff.
Right, and that's also why I'm not getting the grant, but I'm getting the office space for cheap.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, 3 years ago, before Android hit the market and it was real big, I had the luck of trying to deal with manufacturers over there with a $40 PC idea. So I found out that you have, I call them assemblers, and then you have true manufacturers, and then you have the people who build the parts. So like Andrew said, I mean, you may deal with someone today, but they may not be there tomorrow because they may be an assembler. So in this world, we have something called ODM and OEM. So you have ODMs who actually design these products, and then the OEMs are the ones who pick which ones they want. They put their logo on it. They say, I want this processor. I want this amount of memory. So you have to basically understand some of those concepts before you deal with some of these so-called manufacturers over there. So a good place to start is, as you all know, Alibaba. And you can use Alibaba Express to test out some of those products.
So if you've ever been to Alibaba, you're talking about it's like a big website where you can source. That conference that we went to was like a real life Alibaba. Like you walked up to a vendor who had all their wares and you talked to them. They knew English and they had catalogs. They have a pile of catalogs. I mean, it was the first vendor we walked up to. I said $65. They actually the price was very exact. It was $64.60.
I mean, we keep asking the question: how do these people keep in business? I mean, there's aisles of speakers and tablets. How
Watches,
are they in business? I mean, I don't understand. So, but obviously they're there. So, but that goes back to my original. Don't assume anything. I mean, you go in. Don't assume that you order 100 will show up perfectly. Don't assume you can return them. Don't assume you pay and they will come. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
One question, somebody mentioned that what if you buy something a year and in a year you want to buy it from them again, the factory may not be there. What's the actual failure rate of local business?
I have no idea.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's incumbent on you. A lot of the questions we were asking are who are your current customers? And a lot of them couldn't say. So then you were like, okay, well, so they just started yesterday type thing. So that's a reality. But it's the same reality in the U.S., right? You hire a software development firm to build your software, and 2 days later they go out of business. I mean, you have that, right? So you look at references and you try to figure that out. But that's a good stat. I don't think you will ever get a precise number from the Chinese government, though. I think you have to talk to.
They say everybody survive 100% survive. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, what kind of bleed do you see between the mainland China and Hong Kong? Do you see like any talent pool coming from mainland China to Hong Kong, or
Yes.
vice versa?
Yes, I mean, I hired 3 people. One of them was from mainland China, and so yeah. So there's a lot of that happening.
There is a bleed of people coming into Hong Kong to work, but what was fascinating, and I highly recommend anyone get a chance to see this, is the stark difference. So you're in Hong Kong, and again, Hong Kong used to be a British colony. It's very westernized. It's just like hanging out in like Tyson's Corner of downtown DC, or it's actually it's a clean New York City. Just there's far more Asian people there, right? I mean, it's just like being in New York City, and there's less trash. You go into mainland China, and it's literally it is a different world. Like we walk through these gates, you go through two different like security, immigration. They stamp you, they look at you all seriously, like they stamp you. They don't ask you any questions. They're all wearing masks because of the avian flu, so it was really freaky. And you're like, oh gosh, am I going to die when I'm out here? And then you go into mainland, and it's like, am I on the moon now? Like, there's no signs. There's like no blinking signs. There's no English. I took a picture of this. I went to the bathroom, and instead of being a toilet, it was a hole. And I took a picture. I did. And I was born and grew up in Turkey, so I've been exposed to other cultures, and it was like, wow, I've now entered China, right? This is Hong Kong. This is China. So it was fascinating. But there is a heck of a lot of wealth in Shenzhen. I mean, it was beautiful from the standpoint of huge buildings, all these factories that are just, they're basically printing money, right? Because they're, they cheap labor, and they have all these great Western companies that buy, 100,000 units. But it is a different world, and there is a lot of people coming from mainland into Hong Kong because, I think they can make more money in Hong Kong because, again, U.S. companies are going there and hiring.
Well, I mean,
Can
a
you
lot of
buy straight from? I mean, because you were talking about like it has to be 51% owned if you like establish a presence there. But I mean,
yes,
a lot of times you're just buying. Right?
Yeah, you could walk into Shenzhen and walk to one of these factories, and if you could convince them to sell you one, you could walk back with one. In fact, Todd walked back with various speakers.
Yeah, I have 2 tablets with me.
Yeah.
So now I think we're about to be kicked out, so we should close. But go ahead.
Where if you want to buy 1,000? Can you buy it right there on the spot?
No, you can't buy 1,000 right there.
Well, you have to worry about how you get into the U.S. I mean, there's some import. Yeah, but you can. I mean, literally, they'll give you a business card. You develop a relationship, and you can. It's not that hard.
So yeah, go ahead.
Just to give a different perspective, because things have come off a little bit negative, I would say. We're a 4-person company. We sell to China.
What do you sell?
Software. So software as a service. It's also an app. We sell only to universities. So we do not have an enterprise in China, but we can create one. It's called the WOFE, Wholly Owned Foreign Enterprise. The license you're talking about, you need to host content in China. It's called an ICP. Right. We don't do that, neither do our competitors. They host in Singapore on Amazon AWS. We host here in Virginia. So not everything's blocked by the Great Firewall. In fact, most sites are not.
Right.
Now, Facebook is, Twitter is, there's a few others that are. There are Chinese equivalents of those. So the Chinese equivalent of Facebook is called Renren, which means people in Chinese. Right. Twitter is Sina Weibo. eBay or PayPal's Tencent, I think it is. So they've developed all these. This is all there in China. The credit card system is called UnionPay, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
You said 4 people. Which one of you is a Chinese national or?
None of us.
None of you, really?
Yeah, and we don't have an office in China. So.
You sell to China, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you break? I mean, do you have like contacts in China? Do you have an attorney that knows Chinese law? I mean.
So right now we're in a reseller agreement, and the agreement is written in both English and Chinese by a foreign attorney in Beijing.
Okay, so but you have boots on the ground in China that.
No, we have no boots on the ground in China.
But you have a reseller.
We're about to do a deal.
Okay, all right.
So prior to that, we just sell direct, and even the capital controls. I thought, how are they going to get the U.S. dollars? Are they going to be able to pay us all this stuff? No problem. Wire transfer shows up the next day. The only thing they like in China is they want to see paper invoices. So we have to, if you have a chop, it's like a company seal. We have to do that. I think in duplicate and like FedEx it over there in one day, but I'll do that for a couple $1,000. Who cares about $50? So, I mean, the general idea is this kind of thing isn't impossible to do. In terms of the iPhone and Android part, the last time I was in China, and I was in Shenzhen like you were, I was in Guangzhou, I was in Beijing, I really looked at this device and the phones because I know these numbers you're talking about, and I said, but wait a minute, what are the young people using? And every time I got in the subway in all these different cities, that's all I was doing is looking around. What phones are people using? What are the young people using? Interestingly, over there, iPhones are a status symbol, much more than they are here, and it's because of the cost.
Right.
Think of the salaries there. The reason Android has a high penetration is because it's much, much cheaper. Right. If you want to be cool, you're going to have an iPhone. In the US, it might be a little different because this cost isn't as much of an issue. So I know that they're saying Android's going up in China. It is. My feeling, and I don't have the data on this, is this is lower income level people who have feature phones, who are moving to smartphones, and all they can afford is Android.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah,
They actually
definitely.
touched on that, and I wish you would speak up a little bit earlier.
No, this is
You
good.
should be up here talking
This is
about
good
it,
because
right?
is it a positive? Because I will I will be honest, I walked away with a very negative attitude. But I'm in a different business, you know, enterprise sales to big Chinese companies just doesn't make sense at this point for our company. But it's good to know that, you know, you guys have had success, because when we met with China Telecom, we all walked away and we felt that they were subtly saying, stay the F out of China, you Americans. I mean, that's literally the message we got.
You know, a lot of people, when we started, it's impossible. How are they going to pay you? They're going to want something called a fa payao, which is the official Chinese invoice. How is this all going to happen? You're selling to universities. These are publicly funded, massive things, procurement. Oh no, I mean, they pay faster than our customers in the U.S. Wire transfer next day, done.
That's
So,
great. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it didn't, and I believe, I'm trying to remember if the money came from Hong Kong or China. I don't remember exactly. We've been selling in Hong Kong for years, that's easy. But, you know, it's basically, it's not impossible to do. And you do need to just, you know, manage things and go in with the right way. But it's not impossible to do.
But that was, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was, part of the question was, what was that first step? Like, where did you say, oh, this is where I want to go, and this is how we're going to do it?
Did the Chinese, universities find you? Or, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, actually, so, yeah, I mean, our product, it's not really important. It basically manages research in universities. So what happens is people use it in the U.S., they get their PhD, they go to a university in China, and they say, why don't we have this? And then they contact us. Now we're actually doing marketing in China, but for us that means go to special academic conferences. I'm the only non-Chinese person in a conference of 3,000 people, but you go there, you get the name out, you do that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's not impossible. In terms of hardware and factories, so Shenzhen is one of 3 major cities in the south of China, called the Pearl River Delta. Each one of these cities has about 10 million people, so you're talking a catchment of about 30 million. In Shenzhen, according to my friend who does sourcing there, in the last economic downturn a couple of years ago, between 20 and 50,000 factories closed down in Shenzhen. But all of these are operating on the margin. So when people are talking suppliers disappear, yes, these are all the ones operating on the margin. The way you get quality, well, Apple and all these guys, they've got people sitting there watching quality all day. I've ordered from China too, direct large quantities in our last batch. Quality problems, of course, I mean, you kind of expect it. But if you have people there watching it, you're going to get that. But it's, yeah, you have to watch it. Everyone's down to the margins. It's such tight margins there that it all makes a difference. So, you know, but again, these things are possible to do. Depends on your industry. I didn't know about the Google Play Store thing. You know, we have our app in China, but you know, I haven't looked to see if we're getting any downloads from China. So maybe we're not. I'm going to check that when I get home.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Right, so yeah, with that said, I think we should close tonight. Tony, you want to make the last remark?
Well, no. Well, I was going to add on to this thing. If you've read the news recently, Apple's made a deal with the Indian government. We're trying to make a deal to lower the cost to subsidize iPhones to students over in India. So along with the rumored iPhone Mini that's about to come out, you're going to see a big difference in the balance of power between Android and iOS in the near future.
India.
So,
India.
yeah, India.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Nice sharing. Let me know if
Hey, you guys like my bag I got in China? $7.